Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to Humans of CNS. If you may not be entirely familiar with what this event is about, Humans of CNS is basically a TED Talk style event for the College of Natural Sciences where students come together and discuss any topic relating to life as a natural science major and the scientific community at UT Austin. We aim to highlight the human experiences that any college student could relate to, including the highs, the lows, career experiences, and even common experiences that we as humans will share during college and in our lifetime. Oh, that was basically that slide. So this is just our banner that we showed. So if you're interested in getting to know more students beyond this talk, we actually have an Instagram dedicated to kind of showcasing students in CNS and the diversity of students we have here. So you can go ahead and follow humans.of.cns if you're interested in getting to know more about that. So yeah, and back to the main topic, I wanted to introduce our lovely speakers very quickly who will be presenting today. So our first speaker is Fatima Sunez, who goes by the pronouns she, her, and she's a senior public health major. She's involved in Women in Natural Sciences, Austin's Bright Future, and she's also involved in the UT, I think it's called racquetball. And she'll be presenting a talk today called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. Next, we have Brett Delatina, who goes by he, they pronouns, and he is a double major in public health and biochem. He's involved in Texas Blazers, Texas Roundtable, and he's also part of the Senate of College Councils. And today he'll be talking about the science of community, the community of science. And lastly, we have Edgar Castillo, who goes by he, him pronouns. And he's a junior neuroscience major. He's very involved in Texas Taekwondo. And on that note, he'll be giving a talk called Still Kicking. So each speaker will have about 10 minutes to present. And afterwards, we will have a Q&A session for each speaker. So if you have a question about any of these talks, then we have a Google form for you. So please drop any questions you have. And I believe that the link was sent in the chat. So yeah. So I hope you enjoy the show. Remember to ask any questions, and yeah.
All right, I guess I'm going first. So, hi everyone. My name is Fatima Sinez, and like Caitlin and Christian mentioned, I am a senior public health major, and I am really excited to be here and talk a little bit about my experiences with you guys. And so, I want to begin this talk by first asking you guys to think of the one friend who's always optimistic and positive, and it honestly seems like nothing phases them. I am that friend in the friend group, you know? And I think that growing up, especially as a first generation American and, you know, with the values that I was always driven to kind of always be my best self and to put forward the best version of myself despite what I was going through. And, you know, I love being optimistic. However, coming to UT, I realized that stressful things do happen. And when they happen, they may break you down. And I want every student to remember that they aren't alone. No matter how optimistic you are, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say, oh, I'm not okay, and to ask for help. Because honestly, these trying times often teach you a whole lot about yourself. Now, for me, I had this realization during my first semester of sophomore year. And it was a day and a half before my first organic chemistry exam. And I think everyone in CNS, and even if you're not in CNS, knows how much pressure is on one of these exams. And especially, you know, on something like, for example, for me, for organic chemistry. And so a day and a half, I started throwing up constantly. And it was at the point where I couldn't even keep water or food down. And the night before the exam, I threw up probably 3 times. And I remember I found myself staring at the vomit in the dorm room hallway. And all I could think about was, oh God, I hope no one saw me, because that would be embarrassing. I felt embarrassed. I felt weak. And thankfully, it was just the RA who saw me and helped clean me up. But despite all this happening, and despite the fact that all I had before my exam was water and saltines for a day, I still was determined to power through. I didn't prioritize my health and what was going on. After the exam, I met up with a friend who asked how it was, and I put on a smile and said, I think it was okay, and just kind of talked about it, and while we walked together back to the dorm. And however, walking back, all I could think about was the weakness I'd felt. It was hard for me to keep that pencil drawing those reactions from shaking. And walking back, I had never felt more alone. And I knew that something was wrong. So I went to the doctor, and I was diagnosed with C. diff twice during my sophomore year as a result of antibiotic resistance. And for those of you who don't know, C. diff is an antibacterial infection of the colon, and it often manifests whether it's through vomiting, through diarrhea, and for me, I couldn't eat solid food for months at a time as a result of having it twice. And so multiple times a week, I had to go to the UHS or urgent care and was given IVs. And at the same time, I couldn't eat solid food for months. And I remember being on those IVs, I realized I didn't feel like myself. A week or two before, I was in the gym lifting weights, and here I could barely lift the Gatorade they gave me next to me. And it took me a while to let my friends in because I didn't want people to see me like this. This is not who I was. But I realized that over time, I found the courage to not only let them in, but I realized that even though I was away from my family, I wasn't alone. And I drew on the emotional and physical support of those around me. It was the small things, once you start to let people in and say, hey, this is what I'm going through, and I'm not okay. It was the little things like them bringing yogurt when I couldn't have the strength to go down from my dorm to the kind of dining hall and get myself yogurt, because after a month or two, all I could have was rice and yogurt and some of the plainer foods. Or it was not being able to get up and go to class or go to study groups, and having friends FaceTime me through study groups and help explain stuff to me through that method. Because I also didn't want to give whatever I had, give the C. diff to anyone else, and as a result of it being contagious. And so I leaned on them for support. And at the same time, I also leaned on faculty for support. So I actually made a really meaningful connection with Dr. Felkner, who was my former public health professor. And so I found the courage to do something I probably never would have done in high school. I emailed her and said, oh, this is what I'm going through, because I remembered that she had done some research on the condition that I had. And so she helped me get through not only this illness, gave me ways to manage it, but also how to manage my academics in such a trying time. And she provided me with guidance, and I'm really honored and grateful to have had this connection relationship, because she's someone I look up to and someone I still keep in touch with. At the same time, I valued everything and all the support the healthcare professionals gave me. They noticed my curiosity as a pre-medical student, and not only, and while I was there for maybe an hour or two getting IVs, they would explain to me the tests they were doing and how to read them, and really allow me to kind of take an active role within my care. And so I realized that, looking at actually my doctor, her nutrition expertise also inspired me. She messaged me multiple times a week through the portal to talk to me about my diet plan. And she tailored the fact that I was living in a dorm, not having access to everything and all the foods, and how to adjust it accordingly. And so I realized even then that this is the type of doctor that I want to be. So it influenced me that way as well. And it was very stressful. I can talk about a lot of the good things I've learned and a lot of the bad things, but ultimately, I remember at that time having the pressure of a new job that I had started, academics, being in college, being away from everyone, and going through this. I'm really lucky to have recovered, but it definitely was stressful. So what I honestly really turned to was meditation and spirituality and connecting with my religion and my beliefs. And so that's something that is something that may work for you, may not. But ultimately, what I found were coping techniques that I still continue to utilize, because from then on, I realized stressful things happen and there has to be ways to kind of manage them and cope with them in a healthy way. But ultimately, the support I had was insurmountable. Looking back, I realized that I wasn't alone walking home from that organic chemistry exam. And it took me a while to kind of find that and get to that stage. But I realized that after I was able to open up, I learned that showing vulnerability is not a weakness. And it's a very trying time, but one of my favorite quotes actually parallels well with what I learned. Steve Jobs said, you can never connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. And that's what I realized. It gave me the courage to cold email a professor I hadn't talked to in a long time. It made me understand that I want to be a doctor that values patient-centered care and empathy. It also allowed me to kind of take an interest in nutrition, and it inspired me to pursue a concentration in nutrition for public health. And at the same time, I was really interested in gastroenterology. And so actually, while I was volunteering for Austin's Bright Future with the homeless population, one of the people that I was working with was actually going through a condition similar to mine. So while I was serving him food, he was talking about how this condition was affecting him, and I could give him some feedback on maybe some foods to eat and how I managed it. And so it established this really meaningful connection that way. And so ultimately, it allowed me to see the biopsychosocial impacts having a disease or an illness can have on an individual and on the situation, especially as a college student. And so what I want you guys to remember, and if you had asked me this probably when it happened or even a month or two before, I would not have told you this, but there will be downs, whether in college or professional life, whether they're academic or physical or emotional, and especially I think with what we're facing today with COVID-19, whether you have someone who has a disease, whether your family is going through a rough time, or whether you have this disease or anything else, whatever it is, whatever you're going through matters. It's not small. It's not small enough to not talk about. But what's most important is that you have to be vulnerable. Be open with yourself and with others around you. What I realized, I think, throughout college, and especially starting with this situation, is that we can't control the situations that we're in. We can't necessarily control all of our situations, but we can control our reaction to them and how we deal with those problems and what we learn from them. And it's important to realize that, and also surround yourself with people who build you up. And going through these things, going through hurdles and going through and having this illness taught me resilience. But it also taught me that resilience and bravery is not a one-person job. It's a team effort. And it shaped me to be the person that I am today. And so that's what I want to end with. Whatever issues that you're facing, they're not small. Every experience adds to who you are. And know that there are people, especially in CNS or whatever your major you're in, whether you've graduated, to help you. Don't be afraid to go the extra mile to email that professor. And don't be afraid of looking embarrassed or weak or vulnerable, because ultimately, it's okay not to be okay.
Round of applause.
Giving me the time to share my story.
Yes, thank you so much, Fatima, for all the great advice and for being open with your story. Hello, everyone. My name is Caitlin. I'll be one of the moderators for this event, and we'll be launching into our Q&A time. Chris just sent in our chat a Google form that you could use to submit questions, and you can leave them anonymous or put your name on them if you want to, but we'll be asking Fatima some questions, and we already have one from the form. It says, do you have any advice to other students who may also deal with pain and fatigue while having to juggle classes?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad you brought it up because, like I said, one of the biggest things is make sure that maybe friends around you, it might not be everyone, you don't have to be open and tell everyone about what you're going through. I understand, like, people value confidentiality, but maybe have one or two friends, maybe have, especially family members too, if they're around or if you can talk to them frequently, know what you're going through and be able to support you. And if you can, and if you don't have that, reach out to faculty members and tell them, especially if you're in classes, tell them about the pain and fatigue that you're facing and that you're dealing with, and they will understand. Some of them may not. I'm not gonna sit here and say everyone understands, but you'll be surprised. And I think that's one of the biggest things to do. And also, you know, for me, something that really helped me was like turning to my beliefs and spirituality and meditation and just kind of centering yourself, taking time to figure out a way to do the things you love. So I love playing racquetball. And so when I was sick, I couldn't necessarily go and play long games because I'd get tired. But I'd go to the court with my racket and just kind of stand there and hit balls because it kind of made me feel better about myself and made me feel kind of more whole despite the fatigue or whatever that I was facing. So maybe drawing on whatever that your interests are.
Awesome. So we have another question, and it's kind of following up on the things you just said, but how can you approach professors when they seem intimidating at times in regards to your personal circumstances? And I think this is especially true for the time that we're in, where everyone has different circumstances.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And what I would say is I think it's harder to do this over email. So my always go-to is when I'm talking to a professor, whether it's, you know, in regards to a difficult situation or not doing so well in a class, or even, you know, asking recommendation letters, is to like email them, say, hey, I was wondering if I could meet up with you for a moment. Do you have time to kind of set up a Zoom meeting where we can discuss certain things? And you don't have to be super specific in an email, but I think that talking to someone face-to-face helps them to understand them better. And it kind of, I think, humanizes the more intimidating professors because they're also on the other side of the screen. And, you know, they're kind of dealing with their family or their, you know, whatever is going through. We're all human. And I think just having that face-to-face connection is a lot better. And I think it comes across as more genuine too.
Yeah, I really like what you said about how we're all human. You know, everyone's going through something, but we can all kind of have empathy for each other because we can understand that it's not always going to be fine and dandy all the time. We have another question that was submitted, and this person asks, what was the first step in reaching out to others? How do you reach out to friends or family who think everything is okay?
Yeah, the first step for me was definitely, I remember when I was like throwing up or whatever, I'm close to my family and I'm thankful for that relationship. So I was able to tell them, oh, something's not right. Like I don't feel well, I'm throwing up, and kind of having their like, oh no, it's gonna be okay. And at the time I didn't have a very supportive roommate either. So, you know, some of you guys might, and that's a great source of like a person who may really truly understand what you're going through because they're right there with you. But if you don't, reach out to a family or maybe a close friend. I was more comfortable reaching out to my family and kind of only told them for the first few days, 1 or 2 days, and like probably, and I only told one other person until maybe 2 or 3 weeks in. And I mean, it's difficult. I think you just have to take the first step and say, hey, I need to talk to you, or hey, I'm going through a difficult situation, and like maybe call them. Like I am a big proponent of like FaceTiming and calling as opposed to texting. But you know, it's hard. Just like start with one person that you're comfortable with, and then you'll know who to like kind of reach out to and who you think is going to support you and build you up.
Yeah, that's really great. I think, like you said, just taking that first step can be the hardest.
Yeah.
We have another question. The question is, if you could tell something to your freshman year self, or maybe your sophomore year self, because this is something that you experienced during your sophomore year, knowing what is to come, what would it be?
I would say that this is probably, this is probably one of kind of the first hurdles you'll go through. And, you know, it was definitely probably one of the biggest challenges for me, but knowing that it's going to be okay. Like this isn't like, honestly, like at the time I thought, am I going to get better? Cause it was such like I was better and then I wasn't, and it got actually worse. And so there were only like 3 antibiotics to kind of treat what I was going through. So like, I honestly thought that this wouldn't end. And, you know, I couldn't honestly see that future self, you know, of me. And I didn't realize, I didn't know how to even get through classes. And I would tell myself to take it slowly, to know that it's going to be okay. I feel like sometimes it's, you know, we can't know the future, but knowing that we're going to get through it would have been comforting. Knowing that I'd be here today talking about it with you guys and being open enough to say anything, because You know, I'm sure a lot of people who I'm friends with maybe don't know the full story. You know, I told people who I was close to, who I felt comfortable with. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. If you guys have any more questions for Fatima, you can put them in the chat and we can try to get to them at the end if we have time. But with that, we'll be transitioning to our next speaker, who is Edgar Castillo, and he'll be sharing you his story.
Awesome. Well, my name is Edgar Castillo. I am a junior neuroscience major, and this was the part where I was told to have some kind of hook. Looks pretty good to me, right? Yeah, no, just me? Okay. Well, this is only the beginning, so get ready for a lot of punny jokes now. So to start you all off, I got to take you back about a decade or so. This was a point in my life where I was bullied pretty extensively for being a nerd or not being cool and whatnot. And so I really took this to heart, and I just really wanted to be cool and fit in with all the cool kids and whatnot. And at the time, one of the coolest things, or some of the coolest people to me, were Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee. I was like, they could do backflips, they can use nunchucks, you know, what's cooler than that? And so I went up to my mom and I was like, hey mom, I want to do karate. She was like, nah. Hey mom, I want to do karate. Nah. And for years it went on like this. I was just constantly nagging her, being like, mom, I want to do karate. I really want to do karate. And after me being annoying, because that's what I am, I finally got her to succumb to it, and she put me in Taekwondo, which ultimately isn't karate, but you know, tomato, tomato, same thing. So I continued with Taekwondo. I ended up falling in love with it, and I did it all throughout middle school and high school. Then I ended up coming here to UT. I came with the full intent of trying out new things. You know, I was like, you know what, I did Taekwondo for so long. Let's kind of throw the towel with that. And you know, college is time for exploring, right? Try new things. Needless to say, that didn't happen. I ended up going to the Texas Taekwondo mat room, and I ended up falling in love with the sport once again. And to this day, I am so grateful that I did, because that is where I have formed my closest relationships and where I have made my most fond memories. And that goes without saying that I think it is very important that you find something that you're passionate about, that you can really, you really have fun with, to get you away from the mundaneness that is college, you know, with all these exams, with all these homework assignments, all this studying. You need to take a break and kind of deviate yourself from college, because at the end of the day, your best friends aren't going to be the ones in your classes, at least not most likely. At least it's not the case for me, unless y'all are super social. I'm not. But your most fondest memories are not going to be that third lecture, your second semester of your freshman year, where they introduce this random obscure topic that you probably don't even remember at this point. They're going to be from the clubs you make and the friendships you make outside of classes. That's where you're going to refresh. That's where you're going to recharge. And generally speaking, that's where you're going to relieve most of your stress. That saying, as great as a club as Texas Taekwondo has been for me, it isn't without its thorns. It's been very difficult from pretty much the get-go. So since I was in Taekwondo before, I moved up pretty quickly within the club. And so I ended up being invited to what is called the high performance team. This is basically a group of black belts that train super extensively, that everyone reveres. So at the time, little freshman Edgar, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to be part of this HP team. What is this? It's like, yes, I want to do this. Of course. But, you know, I didn't really know I did know what I was getting myself into, but it was a ton of work. So beginning my second semester of my freshman year, I went full throttle. It was 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, often either weekly or bi-weekly. We'd be going out of town to go to training seminars and tournaments and whatnot. And man, but it was very difficult, but it was definitely the time where I've grown the most in my Taekwondo career. And then came around the time of March where US Open was going on, and all of my Taekwondo, my high performance teammates were going. And I just kind of on a whim at the last minute decided, you know what, I'm going to. And this would actually be my very first international tournament. And so leading up to it, I was kind of having some doubts. I was like, you know, what makes me, some little freshman from nowhere who hasn't pretty much won one single tournament in his entire life, in all my Taekwondo career, what makes me worthy of going out and competing with these literal professionals and, holding my own against it. So I had a little bit of self-doubt going in, but regardless, we go to Vegas, I weigh in, come competition day, I'm warming up. I'm the first one to get called up from my teammates. I go get all my gear checked out, all that stuff, and then me and my opponent sit down. I'm literally an arm's length away from the person I'm about to be kicking him in the face in a couple of minutes. And then finally we get our match called up, and this is where the emotions start to kick in. My palms are sweaty, my knees weak, arms are heavy. There's no vomit on my sweater yet, but we'll get there eventually. But in all seriousness, we get to the mat, and I'm so nervous. The crowd's cheering, my teammates are cheering for me, my parents are there, and I go out there, we bow to each other, and we fight. And ultimately, I end up losing. And that was okay. I wasn't sad about it because I could have won. And I did really well against this guy from Sweden. I don't even remember his name, but he was from Sweden. And it really gave me a sense of affirmation that maybe I do belong here. Maybe I can hold my own against some of these amazing athletes. So regardless, we pack up, head back to Austin, and we get back to the drawing board and continue training. Then starts to roll around the time of year, which we're preparing for all year, is the tournament of the Collegiate National Championships. This is the tournament where a bunch of different colleges come and we all compete against each other for points. And at the end of the day, one is declared a winner. And what's special about this year in particular is UT is hosting it. We at Texas Taekwondo are hosting it this year. And not only that, we actually won the championships last year. So we're trying to defend our title on our home turf. So it's a 2-day tournament. The color belts fight the first day. And the first day I'm helping them warm up. I'm cheering them on. I'm, coaching them sometimes. And then that night hits and I'm laying there in bed and there's a lot of self-doubt. Once again, who am I, this freshman, to compete against, juniors, seniors who probably have much more training than I have had? Who am I to go out there and compete? And not only that, it's not just my back that's on the line. Now I have my team behind me. If I lose my first match, that's not just on me. That's me not scoring points for my team. And ultimately, that could be the difference between us winning our championship again and us losing. And so that really hit me really, really hard that night, to the point where I cried myself to sleep that night. But regardless, I woke up the next day, ready to fight. So I'm warming up, get to my first match, and I end up winning by a very, very narrow margin, but I somehow end up winning. But it came at a cost. I ended up banging up my knee that first match, and I still had a couple more matches to go, so wasn't really sure how I was going to pull through that one. So regardless, I get some rest time in. The second match gets called up, and I am super worried about this one because this guy's coach is an Olympic gold medalist. So yeah, so I'm just like, I don't know how I'm going to do this one, coach. So it ended up being worrying for nothing because I ended up just completely demolishing him. I ended up gapping him, which is more than a 20-point difference, which is huge in Taekwondo. So yeah, but once again, I ended up banging my knee in that match. And so it ended up getting even more swollen, even more injured. Then was my third match was against a pretty close friend of mine who used to go to TCU, and I've actually trained alongside him every now and then. And unfortunately, at least for him, I ended up winning. And so then this is my final match and I get to the finals. And my opponent is someone who has been to the World Taekwondo Championships. Yeah, I'm fighting some pretty high caliber people, and I just like, how did I get this far? But you know what? My coaches tell me he's just another guy. Fight him the same way you've been fighting everybody else. And that's what I do. I go out there and I put my heart into it. And ultimately, I end up taking home the gold. For the first time in UT history, a freshman black belt took home the gold medal. And man, I just jumped and screamed, and I was in tears of joy from that moment because, I did belong. I was worthy enough to keep up with some of these world-class athletes who have been a world, who are trained by Olympic coaches. And it was just an amazing feeling. And the reason I say this is not to flaunt on this or anything, but it's to say that, you know, your hard work and your dedication is worth it. Okay, your sleepless nights, your busted knees, my busted knees, I should say, I don't know what you're going through, but all that stuff, it'll be worth it. As long as you're willing to put your mind to it and put your head in the game, put the work in, it will pay off. There may be nights of self-doubt, there may be days and weeks of self-doubt, but as long as you keep constant progress, you will make it and you will do well. Because what's important is that at the end of the day, no matter what life throws at you, it's important to still keep kicking. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Edgar, for your talk. We've definitely been having some response in the chat. Everyone's just in awe of all of the amazing things you've done. So again, we'll be launching into our Q&A time. If you scroll back in the chat, you can see that Chris sent a link to the form that we'll be using. We already had a question actually submitted. And this is, how did you manage both school and such a demanding club?
Yeah, so that at the end of the day comes down to priorities. You know, everyone says they don't have enough time. You know, you ask anyone, they say everyone's busy, but just because you're busy doesn't mean you're productive, right? So just because you study for 2 hours doesn't mean you study effectively for 2 hours, right? So, and it's just at the end of the day, it all comes down to priorities. And at that, for me, my priorities were school and Taekwondo. I wasn't going home watching Netflix. I wasn't playing video games. I wasn't staying up late. I wasn't eating junk food. I was eating pretty healthy so I could stay lean and be able to fight. So at the end of the day, it's just, what are your priorities? Is that show on Netflix really worth finishing? Or is hopefully that A on that exam worth the missing whatever season finale of that show? You know, it's at the end of the day, it's how you prioritize things and what you dedicate your time to.
Yeah, it definitely requires a lot of discipline, especially as an athlete. We have another question. How do you relate all the things you've learned training as an athlete to your academic endeavors and applying that same mindset towards your goals?
Yeah, so I learned pretty early on just how mentally powerful the mind is. You know, going into collegiates, like leading up to it, I said to myself that I was going to win the gold medal. And on years prior, you know, back in high school, I said I was going to get second place at nationals, and I ended up doing that. Leading up to team trials before that, I was terrible weeks of my life, and I wanted to get injured so I wouldn't have to keep training, and I ended up getting injured. So I learned pretty early on that whatever you set your mind to, if it's truly ingrained in your mind and truly you're working towards it, it will happen, whether good or bad. You know, I mentally wanted to get injured. I wanted to break my leg or something. I ended up pulling a muscle, so I couldn't keep training because I knew for me, I wouldn't stop training because it was so gruesome and so intense. But, you know, mentally, you just have to very mentally focus on what you want. You have to really want to go and not be afraid to go get it.
Yeah. So we have another question. I know you mentioned a lot of your achievements that happened early on in your freshman year. And this person asks, now as a junior, how have you grown through Texas Taekwondo? How have you felt the pressure of having to keep up the high standards you set in freshman year?
Yeah, so actually this year, well, a little bit of last year too, I decided to tone it down a little bit on my Taekwondo career, just so I could prioritize my school career, because it's just not plausible to train just that expensive on top of working, on top of studying and trying to maintain a good GPA. So I decided to tone it down a little. That said, I didn't quit at all. I'm still going pretty consistently, just nowhere near as much dedication or time as I was in years prior.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to make those decisions. We have another question, and this person asks, would you say you had a case of imposter syndrome? How do you get rid of those doubts in other parts of life?
Yeah, so I definitely had a case of imposter syndrome, and multiple times in my life I have had cases in which I feel like I wasn't good enough despite what I accomplished, despite, you know, what has happened in the past, what achievements I've achieved. And the best thing I can say for pretty much any mental fight that you're going through is give yourself a fighting chance. And I know, no pun intended, but you know, if you're not eating healthy, if you're not getting good enough sleep, I know, if you're not working out, I know these things seem kind of counterintuitive, that they're going to take away time from studying and whatnot, but in reality, a healthy body will lead to a healthy mind. So you will have much more. You can ask any of my roommates, pretty much any of my friends, I don't get stressed out, you know, and that's 100% attributed to the fact that I do Taekwondo so consistently, because I noticed that whenever I stop going to Taekwondo, I start getting stressed out. But for me, I can literally have an exam in 2 hours. I'll be like, yeah, I'll be fine. And I could fail and I'll still be like, yeah, I'll be fine. Like, it's just how I am as a person. So just give yourself a fighting chance and really just know that you'll get through it. And as Fatima was saying earlier, you know, ask for help when you need it. It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know self-doubt is something that we all experience in some way or another in different aspects of our lives. And we tend to underestimate how much our physical health impacts our mental health, like you said. So I think that's a really important lesson that we can all learn. We have another question. And this is kind of related to some things we already talked about, but maybe you could think of it in a different way. It says, how do you actively apply the lessons you've learned from your past experience, and how are you continuing to apply them either in the present or towards the future?
Yeah, so I don't think it's really done actively. I think every experience that you go through makes you either a better or a worse person. And I think it's just your mentality on that stance. I could have easily come out of US Open and been like, you know what, I lost my first match. I could have won, but I didn't. I'm a trash athlete. I could have easily just thrown the towel then and there. But I didn't. I decided to keep training. I decided to keep working. So I think it's not more so actively applying your past experiences, but more mentally learning from them and, you know, growing from them.
Yeah, that's a great point. We have one more question. It says, what do you do to stay motivated? I know you talked about how so many times you just wanted a break or you wanted it all to stop because at times it becomes too much. So what motivates you when you feel like giving up?
Yeah, so I have had many different training experiences in my life, and I will say it's easier with friends. 1,000,000%. It's don't do things alone. Do things with friends, whether that's studying, whether that's practicing, whether that's pretty much anything. It's so much easier, one, with friends to have fun with, and not only that, but those friends are also there to keep you accountable. So I had, you know, people keeping me accountable that I would go to practice. I had my friends when I was training, you know, we would goof off sometimes because we can't take it 100% serious all the time, or else we'd burn out pretty quickly. So just, you know, keep a pretty tight network with some of your closest friends. And that comes from, you know, getting ingrained with the community that you're passionate about.
Yeah, I think this is kind of, I guess, a question from me, but it's really hard to find that community, and not just any community, but a community that you can really bond with and a community that can support you. So I guess for maybe a freshman out there, or for somebody that's still looking for that passion or just that home at UT, how do you recommend going about that and exploring your passions?
Yeah, so I know it's a little difficult in today's world, but usually, you know, there's a lot of clubs that have like open houses or, you know, meet and greets or info sessions and whatnot. So I highly recommend, even if you're a senior now, like you don't have to start as a freshman, but highly recommend to going as many of those that like pique your interest in any means necessary. Like, oh, if you remotely think chess club is interesting, go to that chess club info session. Why not? You know, if you remotely find any club interesting, take the time to go out there. You know, you might meet your closest friend for the next 4 years. Who knows?
Yeah, for sure. I think that mindset of like, why not, is something we could all definitely apply more to our lives. That's the end of our Q&A session for Edgard. Thank you all for submitting your questions. We'll be moving on to our next speaker, who is Brett Delatina. And as I said before, you can continue to send questions in the chat or through the Google form that we'll be putting in the chat once again. With that, we've wrapped up all 3 of our speakers and all 3 of the question answer periods for the 3 of them. But since we do have a little bit more time before this event is scheduled to end, we'll be opening it up to a more casual Q&A. So if you have any questions that you want to ask any of the speakers about anything, even maybe things that they didn't talk about in their talk, you can feel free to ask a question with your mic. You can put it in the chat. You can use that same Google form. I'm sure I can speak on behalf of all the people in the audience that this was such a great learning experience, and really so many awesome things that you all had to say. So thank you all for attending. If you have any more questions, like I said, feel free to ask them now. So since there hasn't been any questions yet, I'll just start off the conversation. I know all of the speakers are juniors or seniors. Can you guys each talk about your plans after college, what you guys are thinking about doing? We can start with Fatima. Or yeah, Fatima, do you want to start?
Okay. Zoom for a second. Did you say you want me to talk? Could you read the question?
Yeah, so I was just asking, because all of our speakers are juniors and seniors, can you talk about your plans for after college?
But yeah, so currently I'm applying to med school, so hopefully all of that goes smoothly. You know, we're working on interviews and stuff, so yeah, because I know like as a pre-med, like it was like difficult trying to reach out to upper, like, what am I supposed to do when, you know? But hopefully med school's my next step. If not, I'll like maybe take a year off work and then reapply, but that's definitely the path that I want to take.
Yeah, and if you guys have any questions about that, the whole med school process, I think that's something that any pre-med student continues to have never-ending questions for. So please ask about that. I guess next we can go to Edgard, your plans.
Yeah, so similar to Fatima, I am a pre-med. I'm planning to apply to med school this coming summer. So, and hopefully get into one of the med schools, if not maybe some graduate school, or maybe like her planning to take a year off, work on my resume a little bit and reapply. But I do know I do want to do something in as far as like science-y goes, either whether that be research or whether that be medicine.
And then Brett?
Yeah, so it seems this was a panel of pre-meds because I'm also pre-med and plan to apply in I think like 2 years from now. I plan on taking a couple gap years, but when I do apply, I plan to apply to MD PhD programs, PhD being in public health. So bridging both practice and research. Yeah, for I think in terms of like what my specialty would want to be, research on queer and trans health disparities, especially in the youth population. So yeah.
Awesome. Can you guys talk a little bit about how you kind of navigated these past few years? Maybe outside of your talk, any other lessons that you've learned in terms of navigating like what's the end goal after college, or maybe not even that. What's the goal for this year? How do you start thinking ahead with that?
Yeah, I guess I can start out. So there's a lot of like, I think the biggest thing that you learn in college is like time management, and I think that comes from experience. So I'm someone who like is just a chaotic kind of messy person in general. But you know, what I like to do is like plan out like a week or two, and I think that really helps me in trying to figure out, you know, when I'm gonna have time for extracurriculars and such. But I think in terms of planning ahead, one of the biggest things that I think I mentioned is seeking advice from upperclassmen, and you know, understanding just like that if things like don't go your way. Because I remember I took the MCAT twice, so it was a really rough time the first time and trying to study and doing it the second time. But just kind of pushing through it and like having this long-term goal in mind, despite like whatever kind of hell that you're going through at the moment, is what like kind of helps me to keep going, knowing that there is an end goal and knowing, trying to take each day as it comes.
Awesome. I guess I'll continue. So as far as, you know, pushing forward or looking or how to plan ahead, I've been pretty independent all my life. Growing up as a first generation student, my parents had no idea how to apply to college or any help in that. And even in high school, I didn't have much help from them. So I didn't really have anyone to look up to. So just at me personally, I've grown up to be, you know, I pull myself by my own bootstraps kind of person. So even, which isn't necessarily the best thing, I will admit, but even like times of hardships, I'm more of a Edgar, get up, you know, you're falling on your face, get back up, you can do it, you're fine, you've been through worse. And I just kind of take it, you know, week by week, slowly plan ahead, as Fatima said, knowing what I'm going to prioritize and then slowly filling in the gaps with whatever else is to come, but making sure I have my prioritizing set. Like every week I know I'm going to practice unless I have something like this pop up, or every week I know, you know, I have to go to these classes, or I have my work schedule, I have to attend those are my priorities. And then all the spaces in between we'll fill in with whatever studying I need to do, whatever anything else I need to do.
Yeah, I think everything that Fatima and Edgar just said are incredible points of advice. So definitely heed those. But I guess I just also wanted to provide a perspective of someone who is kind of figuring everything out a little bit later. Yeah, I came into college just like also with like a set like goal and how I would get there and all these things. But I think now all of it is like more up in the air. And so for people who may feel that way, like that's okay too. I'm a senior, and I like honestly don't know what I'm going to be doing next year. And so I'm just like putting a lot of eggs into like a bunch of different baskets. But I don't feel too badly about it, because I feel like what's more important is also just like knowing kind of what your interests are and cultivating that through your time at UT. Yeah, just kind of being able to be firm in that, and then whatever else happens along the way and whatever opportunities you land, I think will just come naturally too. So yeah, maybe a different perspective, but yeah.
Oh, I also have a question for the panelists. So I want to know like what, how and why did you choose your major? Because I know that's like a really big deal in college, especially in CNS, because sometimes it can get a little bit deering. Like, am I really a STEM major, or do I feel like I'm doing this because it will bring me a lot of wealth at the end of the day?
Yeah, I guess I can start. I chose public health. Well, okay, so I came in as biochem, and I heard about just like the major of public health being offered at UT, and I think it was something I wasn't particularly aware of in high school, and so I added it on, and I think with that, like intentionally adding it on, I feel like I was just really enamored by the idea of like interventions that bridge much needed like health programs, and those programs being at like every level of like what we call like the social ecological model, just from like the individual to community to like more larger institutions, and realizing that there are so many different avenues to like place yourself in this work. And so I think that to me was like why I just felt like public health was the one and was the major to pursue. It felt like just this boundless potential of like how I can impact my community, and how I can impact health, for that community, both at like a local level and like at an identity level. So yeah, I felt like there was just so much that I could do with public health.
Awesome.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, you got it.
Okay, yeah, I guess I can go next because I'm also a public health major, so I can kind of add on to everything that Brett said. And basically, like, I also came in as a business major actually, because I knew I wanted to be pre-med. I knew I wanted to do medicine, but like, I don't know, maybe some of y'all have this too. My parents kind of wanted to like push me in the direction of business, knowing that I should get a job after graduation, that it'll be less time and all this sort of stuff, right? And you know, it'll be easier having a family, all this sort of stuff. But like, I knew that I think if you're having doubts about whether this is your major, it, like material. I mean, sometimes the grade may not reflect that all the time, and it may be really difficult. Like I'm not going to sit here and say I loved every single class or every public health I've taken, but do you genuinely like love the that you're learning? Interested? Like for public health, I didn't know too much about the major. Also, I kind of like did it because I knew health. And I genuinely like maybe not enjoy everything of the class, but I love learning it. So I think maybe try to look at it that way.
Awesome. Yeah, for me, it comes more out of curiosity. So growing up as a kid, I was always really curious about how things work. So my dad was an IT, and he would be taking computers apart and fixing them and be like, "What's this do? And what's this do? And what's this do?" And just very curious as to how the individual components come together and make the computer run. And come into high school, we start learning about the human body and human anatomy, and that just takes it up a step further because it's much more complex and much more well integrated than any man-made machine we've made. And then not only that, but through my time with Taekwondo, I've learned a lot about mentality and having a good mental game. And the brain is something we still have yet to explore a lot. We still know very little bit about memory, about sleep, about pretty much anything cognizant wise. And so I really want to like dig deep into that realm, and it's really something that intrigued me. And kind of adding on to what Fatima said, it is something to like go into your class and be like, am I really enjoying this? And I remember like actually going into my first neuro class, I was like, wow, this is super interesting. Like, why is the class already done? I want to learn more. So, just things like that.
I have a question, if we have time. How do y'all like deal with imposter syndrome and like the feeling of like being inadequate, especially in like very competitive disciplines and like pre-health culture?
I mean, I can definitely start on this one. I've had chances, despite my achievement, despite everything I've accomplished. There have been times where I have felt inadequate. There's still times where I feel inadequate, and everybody. I'm gonna say everybody has a different way of coping with that. I don't recommend this at all, but I personally sometimes make deprecative jokes just to bring myself humor. Do not recommend whatsoever, but I do it. It makes me feel a little bit better. It makes the people around me kind of laugh, or either laugh or like stare at me like, "Edgar, are you okay?" Like, and I'll be like, "I'll be fine. I'm not crying." But So everybody deals with it differently. But at the end of the day, I think really getting with a community or getting with a group of friends, and you don't even have to really talk about it, but just, you know, them being present, you doing any activity with them, kind of take your mind off of things, at least for me personally. Not only that, and kind of what I alluded to after my speech is, you know, if you don't take care of yourself physically, you're gonna set yourself up for disaster mentally. So, you know, I know it seems very counterintuitive. You know, it's like I'm already in college, I'm already, you know, sleep deprived and cut for time. It's like, well, are you, you know, really look at your priorities and like, was staying up till 2 a.m. watching that show really worth it? Was you know, what groceries are you buying, or what food are you picking out at the JCL or J2 or whatever? It's like, you know, make more conscious decisions, take the time. If it doesn't have to be every day, but take the time twice, maybe start at twice a week, to go and get some activity, even if it's just like walking around campus for a little bit. You know, it's things like that you know, we need as humans to stay healthy, and that will then transition to a healthier mindset and hopefully get you through that.
I think for me, honestly, and Shilpa, we talked about this, it is still something I struggle with, TBH. Just like, yeah, I feel like, yeah, like you mentioned, just being pre-health, I feel like comes with a more just inherently competitive environment. But I also think that being just like with everything online, that it is easier to kind of disconnect from all of that, and really like just focus in on like what you're doing and the material you're learning and like how you want to approach like all of this material. Yeah, I think that has not been a positive of the pandemic, but just like has been something I've noticed with like a transition to like a more online type learning environment. But in terms of just like dealing with imposter syndrome, I think it takes a like really active and intentional effort to like separate your like intrinsic value and like self-concept from like what accolades and accomplishments and like all these external like attributes. So separating those two ideas out and realizing that there's like, I don't know, to me, I think it's just been like this idea of focusing in on like realizing what my interests are and doing what I need to be able to reach those, and not really giving too much attention to like the noise, basically the noise in the background, and just honing in on that and like really having whatever like I put my attention on just be led by like myself and my values, and not really getting caught up in like what other people are doing, which I feel like is easy to say just like out loud and give advice on, but a little bit harder to put into practice, especially with like, I don't know, with comparative culture, like LinkedIn type stuff. But I think like making like clear boundaries between like, okay, so this is like the academic side, or like the org side or the commitment side of like myself, and also realizing there is like another part to yourself, and finding like comfort and solace in that, and realizing that no one can really take that away from you. I feel like, I don't know, might be helpful in terms of just getting through, imposter syndrome.
I would say that, I mean, honestly, I think they covered a lot of the great ways to, you know, deal with imposter syndrome and how to kind of get through that, because it's a very real, and I think I get like, it's things that I think most people experience coming to college, and especially being in CNS. What I would say is that, you know, I'm trying to think of something else, but like what I would say is actually just knowing that there are people who are always gonna be better than you, right? Like this is life. Like there are gonna be people better than you, then there's you, right? And what you can do everything you can to the best of your ability. So as long as you put your 100% in, and knowing that it's okay that there are people better than you, it's actually better because you're there to learn from them. And then kind of being open with whatever, like school, let's say you got a bad grade. Actually, this happened to me in my OChem lab like a week ago. Like I didn't do so hot in my first lab report. And, you know, I came from a really competitive high school where originally I would, before college, I'd just say, oh, you know, and just kind of keep going and hide the fact that I didn't do well. But I like told my friends, I'm like, hey, I got like a C on this lab report. Like, you know what, I don't know what went wrong. And I kind of realized that there were so many other people who also got a lower grade or got the same grade. And then the people who got a higher grade, they actually gave me like advice on like, they sent me their lab report and were like, hey, you can look at mine and see what you can improve on next time. So I think there's going to be two sides to the spectrum, and the best that you can do is just say, okay, I'm going to put my 100% in. And I feel like I always kind of know when I don't. And if I get a bad score, if I don't do as well as I want to, but I know I didn't put all of my effort in, then okay, there's a problem, you know? I think it's like, that's how I kind of look at it.
Thank you for sharing all that.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for all of your questions. I don't know about you guys, but I really enjoyed just all of the amazing things that all of our speakers have had to say. I think that you can never stop learning and getting advice from upperclassmen with experiences that you will inevitably have as well. So it is past 8:30 now, and our event was scheduled to end then. So I don't want to keep our speakers too long. I know we're all very busy students. So thank you all for coming out. Make sure to follow our Instagram, which is @humans.of.cns. We'll be posting similar stories to the ones you heard today, and many more that are completely different. So definitely keep an eye out for those posts. And if you're interested in being one of the features on our Instagram, feel free to DM us as well. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you all for coming out once again. Okay, cool.
Okay, Brett left, but Edgar and Fatima, that was like so good. I'm so proud of y'all. Thank you for going through this process with us. I know it was our first time actually getting to carry this event through. So y'all did an amazing job as pioneers of this event. And we're so, so, so appreciative of y'all.
Yeah, it was really an honor, like such an honor.
Thank you guys for putting this together. Like, I'm sure it took a lot of like planning and especially like with it being virtual, like there's a lot of factors to kind of consider.
Oh yeah, we were planning to do this last semester, but COVID-19. And so we literally had to plan this even before school started, like meeting with Caitlin and Krish on how like they want their vision to be the correct, like how they wanted it to be reflected. And honestly, it worked out really well. I'm really happy about the turnout and like the quality of the speeches, and also like I think I definitely need to hear that because I was in like in a midterm slump like 2 weeks ago.